You are down with.
Yo, Dave.
What up?
Drop the beat.
We like it old school. You know how we do this.
What you listening to?
The brothers from the 818.
91331.
Coimbra, California.
What's up, Dave?
What's up, Caleb?
The real, the raw, the relevant.
No script.
We invite you into our conversation. What's going on, people?
Let me just say this.
It's Black History Month.
You are down with.
The brothers from the 818. Hey, yo, what's going on? You are back with the brothers from the 818. My name is Dave, as you know, kicking it with my man, Caleb. Caleb, what's going on with you?
It's good, man. Happy to be back, and I am excited for this podcast. We have a special guest tonight, and can't wait for him to share all of his wisdom with us and our listeners.
You know, we're going to get to that. Check in for me, man. What's going on? How's your week been?
All right, man. Had a great week. Had a great weekend. I spent some time with the family. As anybody that listens to this podcast long enough, they know that I am a military spouse. My wife is still serving, and this was her virtual military weekend, and that's always interesting. A sad note, went and honored my cousin through marriage, Mikey Turner. A lot of people know him as Double K from the group People Under the Stairs. Interesting about Mikey is that I didn't really know him as a hip hop artist. We would have had him on our podcast if I would have known that he had more than a million followers, right? And when we would get together, we would just kind of chop it up and talk about superficial stuff, not knowing that he was a legend in the LA hip hop scene. In fact, I talked to some of the cats that we had on, particularly Joshua and Tyrone. And Josh said, man, he was my favorite artist. He kind of framed some of his love for hip hop after Double K. And, we both got emotional, and it's a trip because, Mikey was family to me, and Josh was just a fan, and he had a stronger emotional connection with Double K through his music. And I just thought that was interesting. So at the memorial, I had to tell my family, we need to stop having superficial conversations, and we need to be more purposeful in our discussions. And so let me shout out some of those people that was there. In particular, I'm thinking about Etheldra, who was married to Mikey. Sydney was there. Teresa, brother and sister of Etheldra. And my cousin Cedric was there. Sean and Lynette showed up. My aunt, we did it at my Aunt Jean's house. We had cousins and nephews. Both Cece and Darrell was there. Tanisha was there. She had a cute little dog named Lovey. And I thought that was interesting because I never thought about having an animal, but if all pets stayed that size and that cute, maybe I would consider it. In addition to Lovey, I had my family members there as well, and I shout them out because they were talking about our podcast. And so they're following on the low. So the last thing I'll mention about my weekend was my brother. When people passed in the inner city, people like to pour out a little liquor, and my brother Obadiah was there. Yusuf was there. Dwayne, both my Dwaynes was there. Cynthia was there. But he brought out that Douce from Jay-Z, and I had never tried it before. That's a nice piece of cognac right there, man. So anyways, that's my check-in. What's going on with you, Dave?
I don't know in what order. I should have wrote some stuff down. I ain't never tried Douce, but I love cognac, so I'm gonna put that on the list. You mentioned one other thing that I wanted to point out. Oh, the superficial conversations. Yeah, I think we have to, one, we've said this all through COVID, be real intentional about reaching out to family and making sure we make contact. But we have to start celebrating the things that we normally wouldn't celebrate, and even talking in depth about, hey, what's going on with you? What are you doing to pass the time? What are you engaged in? Oh, I'm on the hip hop scene. I'm on the hip hop underground scene, right? It doesn't shock me that you didn't know that, because you're not really in the hip hop underground scene, right? Neither am I, right? But we know people who are. And so when you get engaged to that level, be like, wow, I didn't know that. And now that's a whole nother layer of connection of what have you, that you can have with, family members and non-family members. So yeah, I think the message is, let's love people while they're here.
Right.
Let's be more engaged in what's going on with them, so we can, so we're never looking back saying, oh man, I wish I would, or I wish I could have, or I wish it had went a little bit different than the way it is. So that's just my thought on that. Check in for me, man. This weekend, I kept it kind of basic. Went to the snow on Saturday, grabbed the boys, grabbed Ilana, and we rode up to the snow. I was talking to you on the way up. You was like, man, you're going to run into traffic. You're going to do this, that, and the other. Hour and a half up, man, was in there hanging out, tried to go to a couple of my favorite eateries. Finally found one where the crowds weren't too packed and I could get in. And then we spent about 2 hours in the snow doing some tubing, and took some nice pictures, let the boys hang out. It got cold at the end of the day, and bailed out. I mean, I was back home by like 6:30. So I was like, that's what I'm talking about. That's one of the joys of being able to live in California, that you can go outside and load up your car in your socks and shorts, go to the snow all bundled up, and come back home that night and still be in a normal environment.
Man, you're making people on the East Coast and really all over the country really upset right now. I know I have some family in Texas, and they were snowed in, no power, no water, no food, and no help, really.
Right.
If you're following the news, that's a big issue.
It is. And I've always said, man, I grew up in Chicago. I don't need to see snow ever again, right? But my kids are California kids, and so snow is a novelty for them. I'm like, all right, well, let's go on up there and hit it, come on back. Last time I went during a snowstorm, and I was like counting off the minutes. Like we had drove for like 9 minutes. I was like, that last segment took us an hour and a half last time, right? And so forth and so on. So, but it was cool, man. It was a nice ride. It was a nice conversation. And it was a good day, and I felt like, didn't get that fatigue from being on the road for too long. It was just a good weekend. I was happy to do it. And just hanging out, man, just enjoying, was it the 3-day? No, this was a normal 2-day weekend. See, that all gets kind of lost. But yeah, hanging out, doing the thing, man. But honestly, if I'm gonna keep it real with you, I've been wanting some barbecue beef ribs, man.
Speaking of ribs, man, I was checking out our last podcast, and those ribs were good, man. People got to check out all those spots that we hit up, from Keys to Big Pops to Bobo's. But that food was so good, man. And I think it came through. I think it came through on that podcast as we celebrated some of those eateries in the Pacoima area. So that was awesome, man.
It was really good. And just so you know, I heard back from Bobo's today. So they said they put us a little shout out on Instagram, and it was like, hey, great podcast. Thanks a bunch for the shout out. And I was like, that's what's up. Okay, good. And so I tagged Key Burger and as well as Big Pops. We'll see if they get around to it, but just putting that word out there and showing them that love, right? Because the whole thing is to let people know that there's some good spots out there and so forth. And in addition to the ribs, I'm telling you, what I really want right now is some chili cheese fries, some beef ribs, some onion rings, and an Oreo cookie shaker. If I could just get that, I'd be straight, man. That's exactly what I'm looking forward to right about now. So, right now, I'm just looking forward to, our guests that we have coming up. This brother that's coming up, man, he's just an amazing man. He's one of them people that, you know, if you just can be in his presence and you just it'll change you, right? Because you see the wisdom on him, right? And there's an old joke in the community that says the graveyard is full of young fools, but you get to be old and there's some wisdom about you, right? And so I ain't necessarily gonna call him old like that. I'll let him speak on his own age, but he's just a good brother. He's a good man. He's a good friend. And I think you and I will be honored tonight, as well as our viewers, to meet this brother. So what do you think? We should bring him in?
Let's bring him in.
All right, so his name is Brother Augustus Stone. Think about that name, Augustus Stone. We welcome you to the Brothers from the 818 podcast. Brother Augustus, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so very much. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you, man. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for honoring us and our guests, our viewers, with your presence tonight. How are you doing?
I'm counting them blessings, man, and staying peaceful.
That's what's up. That's what's up. So, you know, let's just jump right into it. So I met Brother Augustus probably 20 years ago. We used to attend church together. We were part of the drama ministry together. We used to do this Father's Day play about teaching how to tie a tie. And he played my dad, and somebody younger played my son, and somebody younger played his son. And it was each father teaching the other one how to tie a tie, up until the point where he was like, you know, let me just show you how to do it. And he gave the entire church a tying lesson. So I want you to have the freedom, Brother Augustus, to share whatever you want. But a lesson like that, let's start there, about teaching a young Black man how to tie a tie. Is there any relevance to that? Is that a significant moment, or was it just something we did just because?
No, I believe that the significance of it is that all too often in the modern day, like where we're at in America, with the social, political, economic environment that we live in, plus our history, a lot of things get shattered. And in the case of African Americans, Black folks, the old days of the village mindset has been completely almost gone to a certain extent. And when you think about it, the stability of any community is based upon things that's handed down from one generation to the next. Because if it's not, then a lot of times what happens is people forget about the mistakes that were made, but even more important, they don't have the reference of the good stuff that came down that worked, and therefore they have to reinvent it again. And so the lesson with the tie was to show it was a reference point for handing down, as you started to show off talking about wisdom. If you live long enough and have children, what you have to do is to give them the benefit of what you learned that caused you to live long enough to have children, okay? And so the village often had multiple layers, and that is because in a village, the village belongs to the villagers belong to the village, but each and every villager belongs to every other villager, okay? And that is not something that is in a society like ours that really sort of places a lot of faith in the lone person moving along to their own drum, okay? There's a certain amount of isolationism in the individual approach and it's not that each individual isn't important, but each individual is only as valuable as the other individual around them who create a solid and stable community in which to exist.
Man, I'm gonna give you an apology real quick. I got so excited having you on, man. I put the cart before the horse. We didn't give you a chance to introduce yourself, but I love that intro. I love how, Caleb, that's that wisdom, right? That I'm talking about. So let me just back up for a second. Brother Augustus, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience, and whatever you want to say, man, just share a little bit about you, and then Caleb will hit you up on a couple things.
Okay, all right. Well, as you told him, my name is Augustus. I tend to go by Augustus C. Stone, and part of that is because I found out that I'm not the only Augustus Stone in America, and not the only Black Augustus Stone in America. And so, but I am the only one with a middle initial C. And so, in finding out that information, I discovered that I think at least one of the half a dozen or so who, even though it might have been spelled a little bit different, Augustus can be spelled a number of different ways. At least two of them have a criminal record. So I decided I needed to make sure that I was separated from any of that.
I like it.
But anyway, as Brother David said, we've been knowing each other at least 10 years or 15 years, something like that, from over at Zoe Christian Fellowship. And we've kind of drifted away. He's gone on to some other things, and I've sort of, I'm still over there, but I'm not there all the time. Plus, this is Zoom time anyway. But
Right.
my background basically is that for about the last maybe 30 years or so, I have been developing myself into what I call a contemporary African American griot. For most people who are unaware of the term griot, they might have, if they're old enough to remember when Roots came out years ago. But there was at the end of it, there was a scene where the brother who wrote Roots and who did the research on that, all of that, actually ended up in the village where he didn't know he was there at the time, that's where he suspected it. But he turned out to be there at the same time that a area griot, a traveling griot for that area and that particular tribal nation, came through and was telling the stories of their ancestors going back 300, 400, 500 years, and he came across Kunta Kinte, and that was Brother Man's great-great-great-granddad, the beginning and focus of Roots. And so I chose that term because I am not a traditional griot. And the traditional griot would be completely connected to everybody within a particular area who can trace their grandparents and great-great-grandparents all the way back to the very first set of parents from which everyone came from. The system of American slavery pretty much destroyed that. Fortunately, for a lot of people, they've been able to, because of DNA and Brother Gates. I know you know of Dr. Skip Gates, who's been doing this do you know who you are thing and hunting up people's background. And so that's begun to help a lot of people get a clear idea of who they are and where they came from. So I tell stories about any of a number of African Americans who contributed and achieved and did things on this continent since before day one, which is 1789. So I can't be a traditional, but I can be a contemporary African American griot. So the people I talk about are folks that all of us can relate to. These are people who did something, for example, that we're still, in a sense, enjoying the benefits of, even though improvements have been made. For example, maybe you've heard of the person named Granville T. Woods. Granville T. Woods in the 1890s created a system he called it the Multiplex Telegraph system. And this is a time before cars and automobiles and buses, but trains existed and rail existed. And you could not talk to each other. They did have Morse code, but you had to use lanterns and lamps, and people had to holler at each other. The telephone didn't exist, and neither did the cell phone. Yeah. So he was able to use the electricity and the actual conductivity of the rails themselves because of the metal that's connected to the cars. And so they could begin to talk to each other, and this saved lives, it saved property from crashes and all of that. It is also the foundational invention that led up to cell phones and modern communication as we know it. And the cell phones itself, the computers, the cell phones, the laptops, all of these, to be able to have such a small package. And I don't know if you remember, maybe, but back in the 50s, when computers with IBM, what we have in our cell phone or laptop, it took a whole warehouse of a whole bunch of things. Did you see Hidden Figures?
Yeah.
You remember that big room with all them people in there? That was the computer. That's why they called the people the computer. Well, a brother by the name of Dr. Mark C. Dean, who is one of the vice presidents of IBM, led the team to that. Now, I'm saying this to simply say that Mark C. Dean, an African American of today, he's still alive, is part of the legacy it started by Granville T. Woods over 100-some years ago. Okay, that's the connection of being a contemporary African American griot. I'm able to tell these stories and help us connect to those people who did things that were that contributed to the greatness of this country, and everybody benefits all over the world from that. And it helps us understand how important and how valuable we are as a people, even today.
Well, let me say this, because David, before you came on, David was talking about the wisdom that you were going to spit, or that you were going to share tonight. And I just first want to just express my gratitude and my appreciation for you coming on our podcast. And because I know that our listeners will be informed and better because of your wisdom. I do have a couple questions as a contemporary African American griot. If you were to teach a history lesson, where or have a conversation about Black history, African American history, where do you start? Do you start in Africa? Do you start when the slave ships started arriving on the East Coast? Where do you start Black history? Because we are celebrating Black History Month.
Well, sometimes it's like being in a conversation with somebody and they say something and something clicks, and I explain something about that came from there. But if I was going to teach someone asked me to come to a community thing, whether it was a church or the NAACP or the Urban League or whatever, and they wanted to have, say, some sort of a comprehensive lesson or a workshop or a presentation or something on it, I would probably pull together a good maybe 30 minutes, 35-minute presentation that dealt with certain key people even before this country became a country. I can go back as far as I believe it would be either the 1530s or the 1630s. I think 1530s. There's a brother back there, I'm trying to have his name come to me off the top of my head, Matthias Salsa. It's hard to pronounce. It's spelled Matthias, and Sousa is Sousa. You can look him up. But in the 1500s, and I think I'm certain, he came here around about 1530 as an indentured servant. Everybody didn't come as a slave before the 1619 or 1620. Most people know that's allegedly the first ship that actually brought slaves to the shore. Prior to that, after 1492 and Columbus being lost and thinking he's in India when he got here, there was a lot of other people coming and doing and being here. This brother was one of those. He was an indentured servant sent by a bishop from England. Okay, he originally was from Africa and Portugal, but he wound up in England and was a servant there. And so this bishop sent him over, representing him, paid his way. And once he had done and worked his time off, he was free to be his own person. And usually an indentured servant worked somewhere from 5 to 10 years. And after that, they had honored their commitment. And he went on to create his own business. He was an entrepreneur, and he became a member of the ruling, almost like council people, or what we would call supervisors. We have supervisory districts of that particular commonwealth. So he was a part of the actual creating of a community, a foreign community that came to this land and began to live and prosper and create another civilization here. And he was there at the very beginning, and he wasn't European. So I would probably start there and then march down, talking about different people, what they did, how they contributed, what their focus was, and how that relates to us today, because we're connected. And we, none of us got here on our own. Okay, we who are here now did not have God reach down with some dirt and put us here. We have come from somebody who came from somebody, and so forth and so on.
Yeah, I love that, and I love how you explained that connection of the history and how, again, just as you said, the story of Adam, of God creating Adam out of dirt, applies to us in a historical sense. But I was born from my mother, and she was born from hers, and she was born from hers, and so forth. So we came from somewhere. I want to touch on, again, we could stay here all day, but the contemporary African American griot, because never would I use those terms, but I'm a person who loves to connect the dots with pop culture, especially with today's generation, understanding how this came from that and that came from that. And so putting them all together, you can see that it didn't just pop up. This was a transformation over time. And so what you started off saying, going back to 1879, going back, or 1789, going back to the computers and so forth, tying them all together, even with the cell phones being linked to the railroads. And I had heard that before, but not the history behind how that happened. Right. So how do you, because you've been around for 80 years, and so this is a message that, you may do on a daily, you may do it on a monthly, however you do it. How do you sell that message to a community that may have lost their connection to Africa, right? Where you got a whole community that's like, I'm just American. I'm not African American. I'm just American. And I came from here and I don't have a connection to Africa. And how do you sell that message to someone like that?
Well, I've never been much of a salesperson. And so what has happened is that it has been a word of mouth sort of thing that has done it mostly. And now, in a way, I am called upon from people who know me just like you know me and ask me to do this. And so whoever the listeners are, I have an opportunity now to partake, to have them partake of the little bit that I know and help them. I never know who I'm going to talk to, whom what I have to say will help them with something that they are involved in or need some help with, or that they will now send that to someone else who said, well, I want to know who that brother is so that I can talk to him. And that's how I end up often doing things for colleges, high schools, even just regular community folks who meet at a church, and often when I'm doing that, this is a capitalistic country. The economic is based around a modified, corrupted form of capitalism. It is not the one that Adam Smith created and talked about in Wealth of Nations in 1820. But the thing is that what I do, a lot of people would command a great deal of money, to come on and do 25, 30 minutes. It's too important. This information has long been, we've been without it. And so I trust to God that things will happen in my favor, but it's more important that I have this opportunity to tell these stories. And in the process, I can include some things that God have had some hands in, because I think people need to develop their own spiritual center. But I'm mostly just a person who is certain that this information has value. And in the cases of the community, I usually do what is part of the tradition, the African tradition. A griot would come to a village and he would go to whoever the village leaders are, the elders or the chief, and say who he was and that he wanted to come and tell the story of everybody's ancestors there and ask permission. Once he had that permission, then he could do that. Now, once he told and telling the stories, every name that he mentioned from the past that someone in that village was related to, descended from, not only does he honor that person from the past, but he also honors that individual in that village. And so because of that honoring, a double honoring, you might say, the villagers are then obligated by tradition and by the nature of them being villagers to provide him whatever he would need. And so I use that same strategy with the community. I'll do what is traditional in the church. You know, you give a love offering. I usually wear a hat. I'm a hat person. And so I'll do a presentation, and at the end of the presentation, I tell them when I take my hat off, I'm done, and turn it over. And if anything I said is worthwhile and valuable to you, you drop a little something in there so I can keep on telling these stories. And so that's pretty much how I've been doing it. But lately, I've been working on trying to create a kind of a modified business structure, okay? Because this is now, and that was the tradition for a village traveler on foot without a horse or a wagon, okay? But I'm in a modern time. And so doing what I'm doing now on the Zoom is a part of that. So I've learned how to manipulate this a little bit. I'm not a master at it yet. So that's pretty much how I've been working it, and we'll see what happens as time goes by.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I love that. There's value in your words indeed, and I know that I've been scratching and keeping notes and trying to keep up with you, because a lot of the names and the dates that you've shared, and I wouldn't say that I'm a historian by no means, but I know my history pretty well, and a lot of it is still new to me today. So as we celebrate Black History Month, this question might come out of left field. I just want to know what your thoughts are about the value of Black History Month, because there's no national celebration, and I know that there's some months, but there's no well-known national celebrations for Native American or Indigenous People Month or Hispanic Month. I know they're out there because I've done my research. There's also a Asian Pacific Month. But what are your thoughts on the value of Black History Month? Because I'm about to turn 50 this year.
All right.
The longer in the tooth that I become, I feel like the value is becoming a little decrease in each year, or the message was a little decrease in each year. So I would like to hear your perspective.
This is part of our the culture that we live in has certain markers that tell what it's about, and having weeks or months set aside to celebrate, to recognize, to honor, to respect different people of different ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, languages, etc. in this country. I think it's necessary. Even though we are the United States of America, we are composed basically of every ethnicity and nationality on the earth, right, to a large extent. And so we should all know who they are. We should all be able to respect them. We should all be able to welcome each other in this polyglot, this melting pot of humanity that represents basically the planet itself in terms of human beings. And so that said, we can also do this more than just 1 month out the year, okay? Every month, there is somebody of African descent who was either born and did something or accomplished something and received some sort of acknowledgement for it during each month. And so a person like myself or you or David can go through each month and find these people, and even on your own, begin to talk about these folks if you want to, or just learn it for yourself. And so it's important. I think it has value. And for one thing, the one reason why it is valuable, and I remember running across a newsletter of some sort that somehow ended up in my possession with a white guy in a cowboy hat complaining about Black History Month. Why ain't there a White History Month? You know, and so forth and so on. And the answer, of course, is that every month is White Folks Month in America, because y'all make sure that we know about that, okay? So, but the thing is that because the history and because the oppression has been extensive enough that the images of people of African descent in this country, we are still grappling with that. An example is, of course, the N-word. All right. Now, I have friends of mine, good close friends of mine, that tell me there's value in the word nigger. Okay. Now, words are words. They have meaning. They have value in terms of that. I happen to be, since I do this stuff, I'm a person that's always looking up stuff. I happen to look up the word just to see where it came from and what a really actual true definition of it is. Okay. And I could trace it back to different areas in Africa. For example, the country Nigeria, there's a country called Niger, all right? There is the definition of the three groups of humanity, Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid, okay? And so you can, from that, begin to extrapolate. You can begin to see, well, how did we end up with this aberration of Negro or Negroid, or Niger or Nigeria? There is even, there's a tribal nation somewhere off of the Sahara, I think up there near Ghana or Mali, and their name is a Nigere, okay? And the name actually means people who live in the desert. So there are any of a number of different ways that the term Negro and nigger could come from that would be legitimate. However, because of the way that it is used for us, it is a terrible word that says to us, we are less than human, okay? And this is proven by the second paragraph of the first article of the Constitution, which relegates the African Americans who were slaves as 3/5 of a human being. And for myself, that is enough of a definition that I never use the word except in an explanatory form that I'm doing now. And so hopefully that explains to you the answer to your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I love that. I love that.
And again, I just want to tie it back. I love the history lesson behind it, because understanding that, you know, we are familiar with terms like Niger and Nigeria, and even, you know, negro being black, being Spanish for black, and how derivatives of the term, the word, the derivative of the word has meaning, but there are people groups who have used it as a tool or as a weapon to make you feel less than you should be. Right. And so it's important for us as fathers, as leaders, as representatives of positive members in the community to turn that message around, to show people not only that we're not 3/5 of a person, but the whole person that we are has value and has meaning and does not have to be suspect to what someone else believes or what someone else thinks. So I thank you for, you know, that roundabout explanation of that, and especially saying how I never use the word except in an explanatory fashion. I think that's one of those where, you know, I laugh tongue in cheek, but if someone were bold enough to get in your face and call you that word, the education behind just that response would leave them confused and dumbfounded. And so I see that and I say, wow, that's just amazing. And Caleb, that's that wisdom I'm talking about, right? That's the, you know, just so you know, Augustus, Caleb and I, we've been best friends for almost 40 years. And back in the early era, the late 80s, we were talking about one day we're going to be older, we're going to have gray hair, we're going to have grandkids sitting around, and we want to be able to share stories and share wisdom with them. And we've just you know, we've done that over the years, and
Okay.
obviously not, we don't have grandchildren, either one of us, but with our children and with people
Yep.
around us and with this podcast. And now with you able to come on and help us share this story. Again, words can't express, there's not a value that could be put on it, but you know, we just want to honor you and we want to love on you. And we just really want to just say thank you for taking this time to share these nuggets with us.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's my honor. I do my best to represent those who have gone before us, and too many of us don't know who they are. There is such a wealth of goodness out of just being able to do that, that I'm content with it, you know. And then I'll be doing something for the church. I think I'm still scheduled to do that, talking about the origins of the song "Lift Every Voice." So I try to stay busy. It helps me from becoming senile and demented, and you know, going off into Alzheimer's, because I'm always having to remember stuff and help tell people about these stories of these wonderful, remarkable people from our past.
Man,
I'm over here smirking because you're 80 and I'm 49, and I lose my train of thought all the time. So maybe I need to give more presentations and read more books. And so, speaking of books, before we let you go, is there one book that you would recommend in every Black man's library, at a home library? One book.
One,
besides the Bible. Yeah, I'm not gonna. No.
That one everybody knows about. The book I'm gonna say to you, I'm not sure. There might be a 6th edition, but you should be able to find it in the library. It's a book written by John Hope Franklin. It's called "From Slavery to Freedom," and it's a chronicle of that. A very well written, concise chronicle of how we got here and what we've done. And the last one that I actually have in possession takes it, I think, all the way up to the 60s and the 70s. So before he passed away, he may have done a 5th chapter, which take it even up to, because he just passed away about 10, 15 years ago, I believe. About 10 years ago. He was in his 90s, about 98 or 99 when he passed away. But he wrote the first one around 1949, and it is an excellent book that gives an overall rendition, a chronicle of how we got here, different things that happened, why stuff happened this way, what the Civil War really meant, the Jim Crow area that came in. Today I did a panel thing with Zoe that dealt with the Black Wall Street of America. You may have heard of the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That happened in 21, but they also wanted to compare Black business and entrepreneurship from that time to now, and also dealing with the Red Summer of 1919. So all of these things, man, it's just, you will find all of that in this book, From Slavery to Freedom, by John Hope Franklin. There's another one, I'm not sure if they made any more editions of it. It's called Eyes on the Prize. It is the history of the civil rights movement. It's a documentary. It's on PBS. They may still have it. You might be able to pull it up and look at it. But they also did a companion book about it, and it talks about other people that don't get talked about very much who were responsible. And these were people. Martin Luther King became famous and revered, but basically he was just a country preacher. He simply rose to the occasion. When the moment was presented, he didn't step back. He didn't run. He didn't back up. He stepped into it.
There it is. There it is. It sounds like something we talked about recently, Caleb. So Brother Augustus, we appreciate you. We love you, man. And we just thank you for coming on. And we hope that the next opportunity we have, you can pick this up right where you left off and share with us some more of your wonderful stories, some of your goodness.
Thank you so very much for having me. I really appreciate it. You guys stay safe, and above all, be blessed.
Absolutely. Be blessed, Brother Augustus. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
Take care now.
Bye now.
See you later, Brother Caleb.
You too, Mr. Augustus C. Stone.
Augustus C. Stone.
Thank you so very much. And good night to your visitors.
Thank you. Thank you. Man, was I wrong? Yeah.
Hey, man.
Exactly.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful. I like you said that you wanted to next time you just want to sit at his feet and sponge off of his knowledge and his wisdom. And he just opened it up. And he was pulling numbers and dates and names and books and references out of the air.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish that I could do that at 49, and this man, Mr. Augustus C. Stone, is 80, and he's able to do it. And so it really speaks to, he was talking about his health, right? His mental health, his physical health, some of the things that he's doing purposely in order to ensure that he stays healthy as well. There's so much wealth in what he shared tonight. Hopefully our listeners was paying attention. And I want to do this before we even go on and move towards closing out. You could help me with his name. He lived on the East Coast. He mentioned strange fruit. I don't know if it's going to show up. I don't know if it's going to show up with the green screen behind us, but this is Strange Fruit. And he mentioned that book, and I went out and I got it because he was talking about teaching his children lessons through that book. I want to offer up one of those books to one of our viewers that expressed interest, and we'll get that book out to them. How about that?
I like that. I was going to mention something similar myself. So I definitely like that. If you're watching this podcast right now, and that's a book that you want in your library, the brothers from the 818 would love to make that happen. Now, if 15 of y'all come up and say we're going to want them in our library, we're going to have to do a raffle and see what's up. But we do want to honor someone with that book.
I'm over here grinning because the brothers from the 818, man, we still from the 818. We ain't gonna give everybody a book because we don't got it like that. But
we don't got it like that.
Want to bless somebody with one of those books. So, Dave, there was a lot of stuff that Mr. Augustus C. Stone shared in just a short amount of time. And it makes me think about all of those legends. And he was talking about Matthias, and like he said, the name was difficult to pronounce. Rahusa, right?
Yeah.
And he was talking about Adam Smith and Granville T. Woods and Mark C. Bean. And so those names people are more unfamiliar with those names than some of the names that we were mentioning towards the end, such as Martin Luther King and President Obama. You mentioned Kamala Harris. In our history, and maybe in my household, your household, maybe even more familiar, more common in our household, we talked about Malcolm X, and we talked about Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. There was names like that was common, and especially during Black History Month, those are some of the familiar names that continue to come up. Rosa Parks, Maya Angelou, right? Those are names that we normally celebrate in the office, in the workplace during Black History Month, but there's some other names out there as well.
There are, and I'm glad you mentioned that because, there's only one Malcolm X, there's only one Harriet Tubman and so forth, and they're part of a history that we learned, albeit a very small lesson in school, but we've learned to appreciate as we got older, but we're also responsible for that next generation of knowledge. And there's some names that are going to come up, right? And a lot of those names are people we've lost recently. Kobe will be part of that experience. Representative John Lewis, he died recently. Katherine Johnson, he talked about hidden figures. She was the African-American woman who was highlighted in there. We lost Shabba-Doo this year, Andre Quiones, Chadwick Boseman, right? Can't let that one go. A young life lost too soon. Tiny Lister from Friday, Little Richard right? All these names of people, and there's so many more that will be part of that conversation, but also, and I don't want to dig up, too much into the past, but names like Ahmaud Arbery. It's been a year since he passed, since he was killed. Breonna Taylor, that's coming up on a year or so. George Floyd, names like that will be part of a history that we have to teach. So let me just share this little nugget with you. I saw a meme or a saying, or you see on, it just has like a series of words or whatever, and whatever they're going to call it. But he said, slavery and racism is your history. How we endured it is ours. Now, how are you going to increase the lesson? Right? And so I look at that and I take that to heart, because there's so much Black history that's out there. And if we're going to leave it, now I'm talking about you and I, if we're going to leave it to the schools, if we're going to leave it to someone else to share that knowledge, and make sure our kids grow up with a more cultural experience than we did, right? Then we're missing the point. The point of having all of this rich Black history is that we need to be able to take those lessons and share it through books like Strange Fruit, through books like Slavery to Freedom, through books like, Eyes on the Prize. It's a 14-series documentary, right? Or 14-part documentary. Those are things we need to be able to sit our children at the feet of the history and give them those lessons. And even if they're just, I really don't want to do this, they're going to pick up something from it. And that is our duty as Black men. That is our duty as responsible citizens. That is our duty if we're going to recognize that Black history is not about the month of February. It is a lifetime daily obligation that we have to make sure that lesson isn't lost. And if a brother like Augustus C. Stone can recognize the value in exercising his brain to the point where he can recall all of these facts and these numbers and these individuals off the top of his head, including providing spellings, don't forget that. Right. Then there's so much more we can do. So much more we need to do. And I'm taking that as my own personal challenge, and I hope you will as well.
Well, we can't leave it to anyone else. We can't leave it to the schools. We can't leave it to the educators. We have to be the educators. We have to be, as we talk about often, very intentional and purposeful in the way that we share this news to our children first, to the community that we live in, and then more globally as well. And so we can't leave it to anyone else, because as we know, a lot of Black history has been written out of the history books, and the positivity from Black history is especially written out. All of those accomplishments, all of those inventions, they are becoming less and less talked about and written about in our schools. And so who's going to teach it? It's going to be you, me, and others like Augustus C. Stone that will continue to be those griots sharing that knowledge.
But you've spent this time with the brothers from the 818. You can catch us everywhere. We're on YouTube. You're probably watching us there now, or on Facebook. We're getting a lot of traction there. You can also listen to us while you're on the go through Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you like your favorite podcast, we will be there as well. We can be there as well. So we welcome you to join us in this conversation and all conversations that we have. And we thank you tonight for joining us for this special event, sitting at the feet of Augustus C. Stone. He said there's a number of individuals out there with the name Augustus and a number more with Augustus Stone, but he's the only one that's Augustus C. Stone. And we're glad we had an opportunity to share that time with him tonight.
Indeed. If you want raw, real, and relevant conversations, come to the brothers from the 818. That's it for tonight. That's it for this week. Y'all be safe. Peace.
Peace.
You are down with
The brothers from the